If you told me what's my favorite handheld console of all time, I will probably say the Game Boy Advance. Why? Because it's one of the greatest handheld systems from the early 2000s. It was portable, it fit into your pocket, and it had an amazing library of games. You got Mario, Metroid, Zelda, Fire Emblem, Pokemon. There was just a lot of good hitters. It was even capable of playing original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, which makes it even more amazing. I remember owning a Game Boy Advance, the red SP model, and I carried it everywhere I go. It was my go-to entertainment system, and I remember using it to play with friends. It was such a great experience back then. Now, having a taste of nostalgia, I want to go back and play those games along with other games that I had missed out on. So while searching up online for Game Boy Advance games and accessories, I happened to come across this obscure system called the Pocket HDMI Advance. The Pocket HDMI Advance is a system that lets you play Game Boy Advance games on a portable screen and on modern TVs with HDMI support. Now that sounds pretty neat. A handheld system that lets you use Game Boy Advance cartridges and has HDMI connectivity is something that I'm looking for in my setup. I don't have any systems that can record Game Boy gameplay footages natively with the exception of Nintendo Online Service, but it doesn't have all the games that I want. So if this system works out pretty well, I might find some use for this. The makers of the HDMI Advance system, Columbus Circle, located in Japan, are dedicated to provide retro gaming products for consumers. They make their own home and portable hardware consoles that can play retro games like the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and the Sega Mega Drive. They also made accessories like cable converters and power cords for all gaming devices, and even released some original video game titles. The company still remains active to this day, as their website is still up while releasing updates about their upcoming products. Now here's the box of the system. The product comes with the portable system itself, along with a handful of accessories such as the detachable stand, a charging brick, HDMI cables, a secondary controller, and 2 screen protectors. The Pocket HDMI Advance was released in June 2022 with a retail price of 18,000 yen, which is about $120 US. I bought mine in Mercari Japan for about $150, which is over MSRP, but it came with 8 Japanese games including Pokemon Ruby, Emerald, and the entire Mario Advance series, which to me, this was a really good deal. Before I showcase some of the games I'll be playing on the device, I must mention about the handheld mode. For my first time experience using the system, it feels kinda cheap while holding, but it's like high quality cheap. The LCD screen can easily get smudged with your fingers, so there's that. Second is whenever you turn on the device, a bright blue light will appear on the top left of the system. I don't know why it's necessary to have the brightness this high. When it's charging, the light turns red and goes dim. The buttons on the handheld controller are somewhat bulky. The buttons themselves need to be pressed a bit hard enough to register your movements. There is an external controller option that feels way cheaper when holding it, but it works way better. There's 6 buttons on the system. You have your standard A and B buttons, the D-pad, reset and brightness, and the L and R triggers. The AA and BB buttons are served as alternative buttons for the L and R triggers. When using the secondary controller, the mappings of these alternative buttons are reversed and renamed to X and Y. Below the system you have 2 switches. The first one is to turn on the device, and the other is to change the resolution of the game. There's also a headphone jack and a proprietary outlet for the controller. The HDMI outlet is on the top right of the system, and a volume wheel is near above the right trigger. The screen has a 7-inch display, and plugging it through the HDMI displays a 720p screen. The games can be played between the resolution of 3x2 or 16:9, but for the purpose of this video, I'm only going to be using the 3x2 resolution because I'm not a huge fan of having games displayed in stretch. Another thing to mention is that the Pocket HDMI Advance cannot play Game Boy or Color games. The company mentioned this pretty clearly from their packaging box and their listing that it ain't compatible. Even attempting to do so will only give you an error. Oh, and they say not every Game Boy Advance game would play perfectly on the system. It can't play Game Boy games, but it also has a compatibility issue on the games that the system was meant to play? That doesn't make any sense at all. Why sell a product that can't play all Game Boy Advance games perfectly? Maybe it's probably a few games, but I really wish every game runs perfectly. They don't even have a compatibility list. Oh well. I might as well try out which games can run and which doesn't. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of this video, to see how they look. Now when starting up, you'll notice a charging symbol from the top right. This indicates the device is charging and it doesn't disappear unless you unplug the charger. But why does it have to be so close near to the gameplay screen? Anyway, the first game we're testing out is Namco Museum. The output for both the gameplay and the audio seems quite alright. The TV picture quality is okay, but there seems to be a thick green border showing at the right and the bottom of the screen. It's more noticeable on display than what I'm showing you. Another thing to mention is when the device is connected to a display, the HDMI Advance speakers continues to play audio. This can be fixed by simply lowering the volume in the system itself, as it doesn't really affect the audio from the monitor. Regardless, there hasn't been any problems when playing Namco Museum, so I guess this is a good thing. Next game we're trying out is the Herb Sims. And everything is looking good so far. The audio and picture quality is pretty okay. There's nothing really wrong I can find. Honestly, not even any button delays, as everything is running perfectly smooth. Another Sims game we're trying is the Sims Busting Out. Once again, it runs and plays just as fine as the previous one. Everything seems to be going well until I encounter a problem. Now, when I booted up the system, there wasn't any save files popping up during recording, but when I loaded it onto my original DS system, there were already save files on it. So it looks like the HDMI Advance system has a problem when reading certain games, at which point the save data. Another thing to point out is that if you ever try to save your progress from the HDMI Advance, it wouldn't save your progress, as well as not overriding the saves since it doesn't recognize them. And it's only happening to this game in particular. Since I'm testing both Sims games, I might as well show off Sims 2. Luckily, this save file can be loaded. So far, everything looks all normal until I started playing the minigames. And... okay... I don't know what's that supposed to be. Okay... that's not supposed to happen either. And... it crashed. Well, that's the first. I tried running the minigame again, and it still has an issue showing the text. I'm not sure why it's showing up like that, but it didn't crash until I loaded it into another minigame. So yeah, the HDMI Advance has a compatibility issue when loading these minigames. Switching up to Sonic Advance 3, and we have some audio issues. Your ears are not lying. The audio is not playing in the right tone in certain segments of the song. And yes, this issue exists while listening on the HDMI Advance speakers and headphones. Just listen to this, it's terrible. How does the HDMI Advance make an awesome video game soundtrack sound so bad? But other than that, the gameplay is fine, but I wish the audio was. Moving on to Pokemon Fire Red, and already we're having bad audio issues. It sounds so off-tone. How is this possible? I mean, listen to this. Even bumping to a tree makes a weird off-tone noise. This ain't looking good. Let's see if this issue happens on a different Pokemon game. Now we're playing Pokemon Emerald, the Japanese version, and it's playing off-tone just like Fire Red. What's going on here? You can't play the audio correctly, or is it too much to ask for? You could just mute the audio and play the game silently, but I really would love to listen to the gameplay music. Also, if you don't know already, the HDMI Advance system can play any regional Game Boy Advance games, just like the original. The next game here is Super Mario Bros. 3, and once again we have audio issues, but this time the sound quality is crunchy. Okay, this is a serious question. Why are we now having audio issues on these games? This makes no sense. Just imagine paying $120 for this device to play a Pokemon or Mario game on the big screen, only to having it sound like garbage. Even the Mario Brothers minigame sounds awful. I can only assume the system is running on a sound chip that it can't play high quality music, or just the sound chip itself sucks. I don't know. There shouldn't be any audio issues when you're trying to sell a retro console like this to the consumer. And for the last game is Super Mario World, the Japanese version. And just like Mario Bros. 3, it's having audio issues, but it's not terrible. The game runs well on the system and hasn't had any crashes. The only problem is that my progress isn't saving whenever I restart the system. Just like from The Sims busting out, you can't load or save your progress in this game either. So now my question is, why is the HDMI Advance having a problem reading the save files from certain games? Well, I decided to look into this issue and I figured out what was going on. The Game Boy Advance game cartridges will come with a certain chip that allows you to save progress. There's 3 variant chips, the SRAM, Flash, and EEPROM. Both the Super Mario World and The Sims busting out uses the EEPROM chip to save data. The Project HDMI Advance system has an issue reading the EEPROM chip since it cannot load nor save from both these games. And to prove this, here's another game that uses the EEPROM. Super Mario Advance, aka Mario Bros. 2, or Mario USA, whatever you'd call it. When the game is loaded onto the original DS, you can see there's already some saved progress. Now, when the game is loaded onto the HDMI Advance system, the save files don't appear. And hell, here's the last Mario Advance game since I'm doing all of them, Yoshi's Island. This game also uses the EEPROM memory chip. When loaded onto the DS, the save files is visible in one of the slots. Now switching onto the HDMI Advance, no save files are showing. That's 3 Mario Advance series games that uses this chips and the system can't detect them. The only reason why Mario Bros. 3 works is because it uses flash memory. So yeah, the HDMI Advance has some serious issues. It has poor audio quality, it's incapable to read certain game cartridges, and hell, I don't think it's worth its value. I prefer any other Game Boy Advance system as long as it functions. Heck, even the Game Boy Micro is a better option than this. I mean, the only reason for getting this is to play your Game Boy Advance games on the monitor displays, which does that job, but that's kinda it. That's the only good thing I can say about the HDMI Advance. It's just that it fails to run like a Game Boy Advance, let alone hold like one. Now the weirdest thing I found out is that the Columbus Circle actually released the Pocket HDMI Advance again a year later, but they renamed it to the Pocket HD Advance. It's the same system as the first model, and they didn't make any changes but a minor name change. And after that, they never made another Game Boy Advance retro system since then. You'd think they would have ironed out the bugs and compatibility issues within that year gap, but no. They just released it with only a name change. And from there, that's pretty much it to say about the HDMI Advance. It's not worth it, it's not reliable, and I don't really recommend it to anyone. And with it, that concludes my review. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.